later in the year, they really feel like the content that's on the current test, they'd be fine. Right now, we deliver the science test in October. They're getting back into the swing of things the first few weeks. They really feel like, you know, if we could give it at the end of the 10th grade year, we'd get pretty good results. The other thing is, speaking to the ACT, until we do the crosswalk, I think it's hard to say that we're penciling, you know, our standards or ACT has set it. We just haven't done that work yet. And I think you spoke to that. We need to sit down and take what ACT is valued compared to what our standards are to say, are we really trying to pigeonhole us into an ACT curriculum kind of thing until we do the work?
And that's the challenge, and that's what we're trying to get at, because they don't need to turn it over to us to do that crosswalk, and they don't. They have done the crosswalk with standards, and we're trying to get that report. Mm-hmm. And so, and that's the challenge. I would love to do that crosswalk. I would love to, and that's the challenge, that's the transparency that I and other states are having right now to get the availability and the
And I guess I think back to our panel, and I think one of the biggest takeaways for me was that value added. As a high school principal, I see it. We need something that is value added for our kids. I guess that was just my takeaway from that.
And that's why I certainly, it is a huge opportunity. It's something that we really need to investigate and and if we can create that opportunity, because it does have value.
I know our ESG friends are waiting on the phone. Quick question or comment?
Yeah, it's a question. I know that we are seeking college and career ready. I believe the ACT is aimed at measuring to be college ready. How does that compare with whatever we're doing as far as the smart and balanced test or other tests as far as measuring being ready for college?
Mm-hmm. ACT takes a lot into account when they determine whether or not somebody's college ready, including the courses that you have taken. So like when I look at my,
So the ACT takes that into consideration, or the college takes it into
consideration? No, ACT takes that into consideration. So for them to declare that I have 23 of my students college ready in science, they survey my students based on what classes they have taken. So if the student says that I've only taken physical science and biology, and I chose not to take chemistry, physics yet, then ACT is going to say, because you haven't taken those other courses, you're not deemed college ready, along with how you perform on the test.
And I think we'll hear that this afternoon when our higher ed folks come in, because they're going to talk about the ACT, that it's the entrance score, but they don't just look at the ACT. They look at your courses you've taken, because I could get a 29 on my ACT. If I haven't taken the right courses, I can't go to college. If my GPA is not high enough, I can't go to college. I can't get into college-bearing classes. So it's not just the ACT score. It's a piece that helps complete the picture of a student.
Good.
When the juniors take the ACT, there's a package that is, there's a survey that they take that is probably 2.5 or 3 hours long. And all of that information, plus the ACT score, is what ACT uses to deem college and career ready. The survey is a process.
Okay. Let's go to our folks from ASG. They're essentially, are they on? Can they hear me? Barry, can you hear me? Hi, how are you folks?
One thing I'm going to, on the ACT, so we test our 11th graders a lot, and they take the state assessment and the ACT. And one thing that I asked two of our legislators, one in the House, one in the Senate, if they would be willing to have the state assessment be part of, and then eliminate the ACT test requirement at the 11th grade, and they said no. So they are still going to continue to require in law that the state give the 11th graders their ACT, for at least this
foreseeable future. Okay. Barry, can you hear me again? I'm going to ask. Okay. We need to turn the speakers up to make sure we can hear you. Let's try it again. Can you just want to test it quickly? Good. give some feedback. It might be on our end in terms of microphones or something. So thanks, Barry and Ed and John, for joining us. What we've asked you to do today is respond to our small group activity work that we did in December. And so I want to say thanks in advance for putting some information together. So essentially what you've done, Barry, is you've taken what we shared with you about the small group work, and you're giving us some feedback on kind of where we are so far regarding that work. So thank you for joining us, and I'm going to let you folks take off, and we'll see if we can adjust speakers so that we can all hear you okay. Yeah. We're having trouble here. Are you speaking, Terry? Okay. We might have a little trouble hearing you in the back, but go ahead and get started, and we'll see how we do.
Okay, thanks, Rick, and thank you, members of the task force for having me present. As Rick said, he sent me a brief summary of the exercise we did last month, and we wanted to just give you a little bit of back on that. I think some of what we're going to talk about, based on what I heard and overheard from your last speakers, is relevant. So we wanted to give you some thoughts on comparing computer-based versus computer-adaptive testing, the pros and cons of purchasing an off-the-shelf assessment. Some of that is going to be repetitive to what we presented a few months ago, so we apologize for that, but we thought that it would be relevant. And we also wanted to discuss the importance of assessment quality and alignment to state standards as you make your decision. And I think you were talking about some of that in the last session. And then lastly, some thoughts on the grade 11 assessments and the college entrance exam. So some general observations that we have is first and foremost, you're on the right track in recommending changes in the structure of the state system of assessments. For grades 3 through 8, we certainly think the purpose, the content, and the item types that you're recommending make sense. We do want to, as I said, make a few clarifications and observations for your consideration as you move down the path towards finalizing those recommendations. At the high school level, it seems again what you're proposing is clear. You'll save a little bit of time because paper doesn't have to be shipped back and forth. But by and large, those items take about the same amount of time to score. Some things that are different between a regular computer-based test and a computer-adaptive test. And the biggest thing, that's different than most of these other things spring forth from this big difference is in a computer-based test, you use a fixed form. So the same questions are asked to every student. It'd be the same questions as were on a paper and pencil exam. Whereas an adaptive test, the assessment items in the exam adapt to the ability of the student. So in other words, if the first question is, say, an average difficulty question and the student gets it right, the next test question is a little bit more difficult. And if the student gets that one right, the next test is a little bit more difficult, et cetera, et cetera. And then conversely, if the student gets the first test question wrong, the next question is a bit easier, and so on and so forth. So the test adapts to the student. And then there are several implications of that. The first one, and one that's important, I think, is the number of items that are required to be in the item bank to deliver one of these tests. So with a computer-based test, you need the same number of items as you would for a paper and pencil test. But for a computer-adaptive test, you need several multiples of that number of items because of the different levels of difficulty, and you want some randomness, so not every student is seeing the same question on a path. So it takes multiple times the number of items to have that item bank. So the implication of that is that for a single state, if you're going to use your own items to do custom development, it's very expensive. So what you need to do is, if you want a CAT, is you need to use a test or a test vendor that has an available item bank. And then with that, there are some issues for security and so on and so forth that you have to understand. Whereas in a computer-based test, you're going to have lower costs versus paper and pencil, and certainly lower costs than a computer-adaptive test with your own custom-developed items. Okay, and so those are that's a big difference to keep in mind. In terms of length of the test, they'll probably be about the same. We have heard some proponents of computer-adaptive testing say the test can be shorter because it gets to the student's level of ability quicker. We haven't seen that in practice so far. But the measurement can be a little bit more precise with a computer-adaptive test. We talked about student engagement being better on the computer versus on paper. It could theoretically be a little bit better on a CAT versus a regular computer-based test because the student is at their level of difficulty and so can respond a little bit better, be more engaged, as opposed to being zoned out or this is too easy for me. And then lastly, again on the scale, both can put students on the scale. Proponents of the CAT believe that the abilities of students at the higher and lower ends of the scale are identified more accurately using a CAT. So those are kind of the similarities and differences with a CAT. Oops. So what does that mean for your state? First, I'd say that there aren't a lot of off-the-shelf CATs available. Certainly SBAC is one. We believe AIR has one using Utah or other shared items. Some of the other CATs that you hear about, such as NWEA, the Measures of Academic Progress, are used for summative assessment. So you need to make sure that you're looking at enough opportunities when you prepare your RFP. we said before, custom development CADs are really expensive due to the number of items required, not the technologies. So as we said, you need item banks in the thousands of items to do a CAD. So I think that there's likely will be more options for you to consider if you are looking, at least look at both a computer-based test and a computer adaptive test. We talked about the build versus buy versus hybrid models, and we'll talk about that then again today. Those will all be available for you in a CAT. So what we would recommend is if you really want a CAT, you leave that determination up to the vendors in your RFP, and the vendors can be asked to respond to one, the other, or both testing modes in the RFP. When we worked with Maine at the end of last year, Maine, as you well know, was also a smarter balanced state. They were interested in the CAT from the vendor as they moved forward. We structured the RFP so the vendor could respond with either or with both. So it gave them the option. Ultimately, Maine went with a straight computer-based testing approach due to some of the limitations I spoke about earlier. So next, let's talk about the pros and cons of some different assessment options. And I see my colleague John Olson is, I think, has joined us. John, are you here?
I'm not sure his sound is on or microphone's on.
Yeah, all right. Well, I will continue then. So again, I apologize that this is repetitive information, but we thought that it might be good to quickly go through the build versus buy versus hybrid options again and what the pros and the cons are. Again, build is a vendor develops a custom assessment specifically aligned to the state's content standards and requirements. So the advantages of that are the state gets exactly what it wants. It will have high alignment to the state standards, can be of very high quality, and there's a lot of control that the state will have over the test, the design, the timing of the administration, when it's delivered, how it's delivered, computer versus paper, what item types will be on the test, etc. The negatives of that are the cost, likely the most expensive option, because it is a custom developed test. The time to market is going to be a little bit longer because the test items have to be developed and then field tested on an assessment before they can be used in an operational test. So it's really kind of 2 years to get to market. And then the results cannot be compared to results of students in other states. So the next option is to buy or purchase an off-the-shelf assessment from a vendor. The advantage here is that this could be a low-cost option because the vendor is selling the same test over and over again, so they can charge less for it. It can be implemented the quickest, less than a year. It can be aligned to your state standards, but we would recommend that you really look at that you do your own alignment study, don't have the vendor do it for you, and make sure that there is good alignment, because this is really the biggest negative we hear about off-the-shelf tests, is that the alignment is not up to state standards. And another possible advantage is that comparability. If enough students nationally are taking the test, there will be some national norms that can be used to compare student results in North Dakota versus the general public. The disadvantages, it's all off-the-shelf approach, and you really don't have control over the content of the thing. Lots of times, items testing student critical thinking skills aren't as either on the test at all or aren't as good as And then in some cases, we have heard that the reporting information, kind of at the sub-score level, is not as good as it could be. Again, and if you purchase something off the shelf, it eliminates some of the economies of scale you might have if you're testing other subjects and could get that all with one vendor. So if your science assessment is with a different vendor, now you've got two different vendors that you have to manage and two different testing programs. The third approach, and again we talked about this, is a hybrid, which kind of combines the purchase of an off-the-shelf test with custom developed items. So the custom items are field tested in year 1 and then available in year 2. So this is a big advantage because you can launch the test quickly in year 1 using the off-the-shelf component. It's going to be less expensive than a full custom developed test. You will ultimately have better alignment to your state standards because you can have custom developed items on the test. And you'll generally have better quality and control than with an off-the-shelf product. So the cons of the hybrid option are the very quality of the products that are sold by the vendors. So you, again, need to make sure that North Dakota ensures that quality and the alignment of the off-the-shelf piece during the RFP and ultimately the purchasing decision process. And then as far as comparability of results is concerned, you're only going to be able to compare the off-the-shelf items, and only if a number of other states are using that component of the assessment so that the norms are available nationally. And I'm not going to belabor this slide again, but we've had it in several presentations. It lists the 3 options here, what we believe are the key factors to consider: cost, control, comparability, quality of the test, et cetera, time to market, and how each of these 3 options stacks up against each other for your consideration. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Ed Raber, who's going to talk about assessment quality and alignment to state standards. Ed, going back to our first presentation, was the state assessment director for Michigan for a number of years. So he's kind of lived on the front lines of this battle and has worked with vendors, both with off-the-shelf tests and with custom tests. So with that, Ed, I'll turn it over to you, and I guess I will turn pages for you as you need it.
Okay, that's good, because then I don't have to worry about getting the presentation sent to me over the internet. I think that one of the things I enjoyed listening to the conversation before we started, because some of your discussions about the use of a college entrance test versus your own assessment are issues that I directly dealt with in Michigan back in 2005 through 2007. So I have some experience that I hope will help. Before we get there, though, we want to remind you about some of the things that we talked about in terms of assessment quality. It's an element as we reviewed the results of the small group exercise that we didn't see really reflected, and we wanted to point that out again because there is a relationship between assessment cost and quality. And also, this is now a new time. We'll eventually, North Dakota, whatever assessments you choose, will have to go through peer review. And the best way to do well in peer review is to be mindful of the standards as you're selecting the assessments and using them. So one thing, of course, that Barry just touched on is that custom developed tests can have a higher alignment to state standards. Alignment is a two-way process. Vendors will tell you that there's something in their test that measures every one of your standards. And you might conclude, therefore, that all of your standards are being measured by the test. And that generally is not the case. And so alignment as required under peer review is a two-way process where you're trying to answer the question, or hopefully answering the question in the affirmative: are all of the standards assessed? That is, all of the North Dakota standards. It doesn't matter whether they're Common Core or not. It is what is officially approved North Dakota standards. And whatever assessments you choose at each grade level that you administer it, is that test aligned to the North Dakota standards? And then how much of the North Dakota standards are assessed by the items in the aggregate? One technique used was the WEB, WEBB alignment tool, and it looks at the rigor of the standards and looks at the rigor of the test items to see if they match. And that's an additional criterion that goes beyond just is there a simple one-to-one relationship between items and standards. And really saying if it's a deep, thoughtful standard measured by relatively shallow items, then it's not really good alignment. Next slide. Quality, to some degree, is in the eye of the beholder, of course, but there are, in the assessment world, several criteria that are used to measure quality. And the one I've just touched on is alignment. How well does the test align with the content standards? And how well do the content standards align to the test, the two ways? Reliability, in this case, is there evidence of stability of the measure? If you were to give the test twice in, say, a 2-week period, something we don't often do, but if it was done, would you get about the same results? A 2-week period is used because presumably little has been taught.